Hey everyone, welcome to Life Reflections. Today I'm sharing a life story that might just hit home for you. If you enjoy it, give it a thumbs up, drop a comment with your thoughts, and hit that subscribe button to join me for more moments that matter. Let's dive in.
Thanksgiving dinner at the Harringtons was supposed to be a peaceful occasion. It was the kind of family gathering that looked perfect on the outside, a massive dining room table, covered with fine china, turkey, stuffing, and all the trimmings that came with the holiday. The smell of roasting vegetables and freshly baked pies filled the air, mingling with the sound of soft conversation and laughter. It was the picture of tradition. But for me, it was a trap I couldn't escape. I had been married to Brandon Harrington for 6 years, but that night, it felt like I was a stranger in my own home. I had never truly belonged in his family. From the very beginning, I was the outsider, the one they didn't quite understand, the one who didn't fit into their perfect, polished world of privilege. But I loved Brandon, so I stayed. I tried to fit in, I tried to be the perfect wife. I tried to make things work. But that night, Thanksgiving night, was different. As we all sat around the grand dining table, with my husband at the head and his family surrounding us, I felt a weight in the air. There was tension, something unspoken, and my heart raced in anticipation of what was to come. It was as if I could sense the storm brewing, the way the quiet before a thunderstorm sends a chill down your spine. Something was off. I couldn't put my finger on it, but it was there, gnawing at me. My hand trembled slightly as I reached for my wine glass, trying to calm my nerves, but then, as if in slow motion, it slipped from my fingers. The crystal glass crashed onto the table, shattering into 1,000 pieces. The sound of it breaking seemed to cut through the room, louder than any of the conversations or laughter. For a split second, time stood still. The room went silent. All eyes turned to me. There was no concern, no sympathy, just cold, calculating stares. And then, just as the silence lingered, Brandon's mother, Karen, pushed an envelope toward me. It was sleek, professional, and out of place among the warm, comforting smells of Thanksgiving dinner. My heart skipped a beat. I knew what it was before I even touched it. I reached for the envelope, my fingers shaking, and without a word, I opened it. The words stared back at me in black ink, divorce papers. The weight of those words hit me harder than any crashing glass could. I blinked, struggling to process it. Divorce papers? Here? Now? In front of everyone? Brendan's voice broke through the haze of my thoughts, chilling and detached, as if we were discussing a simple matter, like the grocery list or the weather. "We thought it'd be easier this way," he said, his tone flat, emotionless. No apologies. No explanation. Just the cold, impersonal delivery of something I never saw coming. I glanced up, my gaze scanning the room. His family sat there, watching with expressions that ranged from curiosity to smug satisfaction. They didn't even try to hide it. This was no longer about me or Brandon, it was about them. It was about their power, their control, and their unwavering belief that I was never really one of them. Karen, Brandon's mother, took a sip of her wine, setting the glass down with an air of superiority. "It'll be easier for everyone, Rachel," she said, her voice thick with condescension. "The family's better off without you." The words sliced through me like a blade. I tried to speak, to ask what was happening, but all I could manage was a choked whisper. "You filed for divorce at Thanksgiving dinner?" The words felt strange coming from my mouth, as if I were an outsider looking in on my own life. Mildred, Brandon's sister, leaned back in her chair, a smug smile playing on her lips as she took a sip of her own wine. I locked eyes with her, and for the first time, I saw the satisfaction in her gaze. This wasn't just about the divorce. It was about watching me fail. It was about enjoying the moment when I was finally broken down. "And the art studio?" Mildred scoffed, breaking the silence with a mocking tone. "You mean your little hobby in the backyard? It's not a real job." Laughter followed. Laughter from Brandon's cousins, his aunts, and his uncles, all of them joining in, each one fueling the fire of humiliation. I could feel the heat rising in my chest, my face burning with shame. But as I sat there, looking at the people who had never supported me, I realized something. They were the ones who didn't understand. They were the ones who had never seen my potential, my worth, my dreams. I turned my gaze toward Brandon, hoping to find some flicker of regret in his eyes. But instead, I saw a man who had become a stranger to me. His eyes avoided mine, his face expressionless. This was no longer my husband. This was a man who had chosen his family over me, a man who had chosen their comfort over our love. Under the table, my best friend, Amanda, squeezed my hand. She was the only one who didn't laugh, the only one who didn't join in on the mocking. She had been my anchor through this storm, the one who had always believed in me when no one else did. I felt a surge of anger, but more than that, I felt a sense of clarity. This was my moment. This was my turning point. I had spent too long trying to be someone I wasn't, trying to fit into a family that would never accept me. But no more. I stood up, my blood dripping onto the expensive tablecloth, and said, "You're right. I don't fit in with this family. I'm far above your standards." The words were sharp, cutting through the tension like a knife. I could see the surprise in Brendan's face, the shock in his mother's eyes. But I didn't care anymore. I wasn't going to beg for their acceptance. I wasn't going to cower in the face of their judgment. "Lindsay, can you take me to the hospital?" I asked, turning to my friend, who had been by my side through all of this. I wasn't just walking away from the dinner table. I was walking away from a life that had been built on false pretenses. As I left the table behind, the shouts of my in-laws faded into the background. The glass door slammed shut behind me, and for the first time, I felt free. It was as if the chains that had held me in that house were broken, and I was stepping into a new life. The pain in my hand, the blood, the humiliation, none of it mattered anymore. It was nothing compared to what I was about to do. This was the moment I had been waiting for. The moment I would reclaim my life. The moment I would show them that I wasn't just some backyard artist. I was someone who could rise above them all. The minutes stretched into eternity as I sat there, the glass shards scattered around me like the broken pieces of my own life. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest, each beat like a heavy thud against my ribs. The room was suffocating, the air thick with the weight of my humiliation. The fine china glistened under the overhead lights, and yet, all I could focus on was the coldness in the eyes of the people around me. Brandon's family. The ones who had always made me feel like an outsider, like I was the one who didn't belong. The ones who had never truly accepted me, no matter how hard I tried to fit in. And now, in the midst of what was supposed to be a joyful celebration, they had made sure to push me to the brink. I had always known that being married into the Harrington family would be a challenge. They were a family built on tradition, wealth, and status. They held their high society image like a shield, and no one was allowed to taint it, not even their son's wife. From the moment I stepped into their world, I knew I would never be enough for them. I wasn't from their world, I wasn't polished enough, and I certainly wasn't good enough for their precious son. But I had tried. I had tried so hard to fit in. I had learned their ways, their social etiquette. I had smiled at their jokes, even when they felt condescending. I had held my tongue when they criticized my choices, my career, my art. Art had always been my passion. My studio, tucked away behind the house, was my sanctuary. But to them, it was nothing more than a hobby. A distraction. Something to mock. And that night, Thanksgiving night, it all came crashing down. "Tell us again about your little studio," Rachel, Mildred, Brendan's mother, said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "How's that going? Still playing at being an artist?" The words stung more than I wanted to admit. But it wasn't just the words. It was the way they said them, as if they were beneath her, as if they were beneath all of them. Mildred wasn't the only one. Lucy, Brendan's sister, leaned back in her chair with a smirk that made my stomach churn. Her eyes twinkled, as if she had been waiting for this moment all along. You know, Lucy added, I just don't get it. I mean, art's cute and all, but come on. It's not like you have a real job. What's the point of all those paintings? Are you ever going to make a real living off of them? The laughter that followed was like a knife twisting in my side. It wasn't just the words, it was the ridicule, the way they dismissed everything that I had worked so hard for. The hours I spent in that small, cold studio, painting through the night when everyone else was asleep, pouring my heart and soul into every piece. But to them, it was nothing. It was a joke. I think it's cute how you think you're really going to make something of yourself, Lucy sneered. But let's be real here, Rachel. This family needs someone with real ambition. Someone who can contribute. Not someone who spends their time in a backyard studio. Her words echoed in my head like a mantra. Backyard studio. That's how they saw it. That's how they saw me. Brandon, sitting there across the table, said nothing. His eyes were fixed on his plate, as if trying to ignore the storm brewing at the table. He wasn't defending me, he wasn't standing up for me. He wasn't even acknowledging what was happening. I had always thought that maybe, just maybe, if I loved him enough, he would see me for who I truly was. But that night, I realized something that would change everything. He had never truly seen me at all. Come on, Rachel, don't take it personally, said Karen, his mother, giving me a tight-lipped smile. We're just trying to help you wake up. This family doesn't have room for dreamers. We need real people who can handle responsibility. The way she said it made my blood boil. Dreamers. I was a dreamer. But what they didn't understand was that my dreams were more than just fanciful ideas. They were my lifeblood. My art was a reflection of who I was, of everything I had gone through to get to this point. But they couldn't see that. To them, I was just the woman who couldn't fit into their perfect little mold. I felt the tears well up in my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. I refused to give them the satisfaction of seeing me break. Instead, I forced myself to breathe deeply, trying to regain some semblance of control. I think you're all wrong, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. My art isn't just a hobby. It's my life. It's the one thing I've been able to call my own in this family that never accepted me. The room went silent. For a moment, I thought maybe, just maybe, I had said something that would make them understand. But then Karen spoke again, and her words hit harder than before. Rachel, she said, her tone cold and final, you've always been an outsider in this family. We thought you might find your place, but clearly, we were wrong. You were never meant to be a part of this. I felt like the floor had been ripped out from beneath me. Those words were the final straw. For years, I had tried to fit in. For years, I had done everything I could to make them like me, to make them accept me. But no matter how hard I tried, it was never enough. The truth was clear now, they would never accept me. They would never understand me. And the man I had married? He had chosen them over me long ago. I glanced at Brandon, hoping to see some sign of the man I had once loved, the man who had once held my hand and promised me a future. But all I saw was a stranger. He wasn't my ally. He wasn't my partner. He was just another cog in the Harrington machine. And that's when I knew. It wasn't just the family that had betrayed me. It was him. He had betrayed me in the worst way possible, by choosing them, by siding with their cruelty, and by letting me sit there, humiliated, alone, and broken. But I wouldn't let this be my ending. I wouldn't let them have the final say. I would find a way to rise above them, to show them that I was more than just the woman they mocked. I would prove them all wrong. As the laughter from my in-laws continued to fill the air, echoing through the cavernous dining room, I felt like I was suffocating. Every word they spoke was like a weight added to my chest, and the mocking tone in their voices pierced through the false cheer of the evening. My fingers tightened around the divorce papers in front of me, the edges of the envelope sharp against my skin, a reminder that my life as I knew it was slipping through my fingers like sand. But as the reality of the situation began to sink in, something inside me shifted. It was as if I could feel the walls closing in on me, and yet at the same time, I felt a strange sense of clarity. I had spent years trying to be the woman they wanted me to be, but I was done. I was done with their scorn, their judgment, and their constant dismissal of who I was. I had spent far too long shrinking myself to fit into their perfect little world, and now it was time to show them who I really was. I could feel my heart racing, the blood rushing in my ears, but I forced myself to remain calm. The chaos in the room was deafening, but I knew I had to say something. I needed to make them realize that I wasn't just some weak, insignificant woman they could cast aside without consequence. It wasn't just about the divorce papers. It was about everything. The years of mockery, the subtle digs at my art, the constant feeling of being an outsider. And now, in this moment of complete humiliation, I was going to take back control. Brendan sat there, his face pale, eyes avoiding mine as he pretended to examine his plate. He didn't even look up. His silence spoke volumes. I could feel the anger rising in me, but I knew that getting emotional wouldn't help. They had done everything they could to reduce me to nothing. But now, it was my turn to flip the script. I slowly stood up, my legs unsteady, and as I did, I felt a sharp pain in my palm from where the paper cut had left a thin streak of blood. I looked at it for a moment, but the physical pain was nothing compared to the fire burning inside me. "I don't fit in with your family," I said, my voice steady, louder than I felt. "You're right. I don't. And I'm done trying to." There was a pause in the room, and for the first time, I had their attention. The snickers from Mildred, the knowing smirk from Lucy, they all stopped. They were used to me cowering, to me pretending that everything was fine. But not anymore. Not this time. I glanced down at the envelope, the divorce papers still lying there in front of me, and then back up at Brandon. His eyes flicked to mine, but there was no remorse in them. Just indifference. The man I had loved had vanished long ago, replaced by someone who cared more about his family's approval than the woman he married. But it wasn't just him. It was all of them. I could feel the resentment building in my chest, but I wasn't going to let it consume me. This was the moment. This was the turning point. I had a secret, one that they would never see coming. Under the table, my fingers brushed against the side of my purse, and I felt the cold weight of the hidden document inside. The deed to the house. It was funny, really. For all their talk of how I would never be enough for them, how I didn't fit in, they had never once thought to check the fine print. I had kept this hidden from Brandon, from his family, from everyone. But now, I was ready to reveal it. For years, they had treated me like I was disposable, like I was nothing more than a minor inconvenience. They had humiliated me, made me feel small, and now, it was time to show them that I wasn't the weak woman they thought I was. I wasn't some second-class wife they could discard without a second thought. I had something they could never take from me. Taking a deep breath, I reached into my purse and pulled out the folded document. The room fell into an eerie silence as I placed it on the table. For a moment, no one spoke. "Do you want to know what this is?" I asked, my voice calm, but with an edge they weren't expecting. Brendan's eyes flicked nervously to the paper, and I could see the unease in his face. He knew. He knew exactly what it was, but he didn't want to admit it. He didn't want to acknowledge that his carefully constructed world, the one where I was the dutiful, silent wife, was about to come crashing down. "It's the deed to the house," I said, letting the words hang in the air, thick with tension. "The house you think you control. The house you think is yours." The room went completely still. The air was thick with disbelief. The tables had turned. Brendan opened his mouth, but no words came out. His mother's expression twisted from smug superiority to something far less certain. I could see her mind racing, trying to process what I had just said, but she couldn't. It didn't make sense to her. "What do you mean?" Mildred's voice was tight, the arrogance in her tone faltering for the first time that evening. I smiled, but it wasn't a smile of victory. It wasn't a smile of triumph. It was the smile of someone who had finally taken back control of their life. It was the smile of someone who had been underestimated for far too long. I mean, this house has been mine for nearly a year, I said slowly, watching the shock register on their faces. The deed was signed over to me long ago. You didn't know because you were too busy judging me, too busy telling me I would never amount to anything. But I've been building my life in secret, while you all mocked me for my art. I let the words sink in. I could feel the weight of them pressing down on each of them. For once, they weren't the ones in control. I was. Brendan's face had gone pale. The smugness of his family was gone, replaced by confusion and fear. They didn't know how to handle this. They had always thought they could manipulate me, push me around, make me feel small. But now, the tables had turned. You've been hiding this from me? Brendan finally found his voice, his words laced with anger and disbelief. Why didn't you tell me? I could hear the hurt in his voice, but I didn't care. Not anymore. I had spent years trying to explain myself to him, trying to justify my decisions, but none of it had ever mattered to him. He had always chosen his family over me, and now, I was choosing myself. I didn't need to tell you, I replied, my voice calm but firm. I did this for me. Not for you. Not for your family. I did it for myself. Because I deserve something more than what you've given me. The silence in the room was deafening. The realization had hit them hard. They had underestimated me, and now, they were going to have to face the consequences. I don't need you to tell me how to live my life anymore, I said, turning to Brendan. And I don't need you to control me. I'm done. You can have your family. But this house, it's mine. And just like that, everything changed. As I stood up, I could feel the eyes of my in-laws burning into me, but this time, it didn't matter. They had no power over me anymore. The house, the one they had always considered their domain, was now in my hands. And that was just the beginning. I could hear Brendan's voice calling after me, but I didn't turn around. I didn't need to. The battle had been won, not through anger or revenge, but through quiet strength and the realization that I no longer needed their approval. I was taking back my life, one step at a time. And as I left the room, I felt a surge of power unlike anything I had ever felt before. The house was mine, and with it, I would rebuild. Not just a home, but a future. A future where I wasn't defined by their expectations, but by my own dreams. It felt like the air had been sucked out of the room when I dropped the bombshell about the house. The silence that followed was so thick I could barely breathe. I could feel the weight of everyone's eyes on me, Brendan's, his mother's, his sister's. They were all staring, but for the first time, I didn't feel small. I didn't feel like I was the one on trial. It was them, and they knew it. Brendan's face had gone from pale to an alarming shade of red, and I could see the shock, anger, and disbelief flash across his features as he realized that I wasn't the woman he thought I was. This wasn't the docile, obedient wife he had controlled for years. This was a woman who had been quietly building her own future, one that didn't include his family or their judgment. I could see the question on his lips, but no words came out. He was speechless. His mother, Karen, was the first to recover, though her composure was rattled. "This isn't right, Rachel." Karen's voice was icy, as always, but there was a tremor in it now, one that revealed the cracks in her perfect, unshakable facade. "You can't just throw away years of marriage and—" "I'm not throwing away anything," I interrupted, my voice steady but full of conviction. "I'm taking back what was always mine." Brendan turned to her, his eyes still wide with disbelief, but he said nothing. Karen's gaze flicked between the two of us, and then, in a voice that was too calm, too measured, she spoke again. "You're being foolish. You've always been an outsider in this family. You never belonged here." Her words were sharper now, laced with a bitterness that I hadn't heard from her before. And this decision, it's just another example of your inability to see the bigger picture. You were never meant to be the one to carry on this family's legacy. You don't fit into this world, Rachel. I stood there, holding her gaze, and I felt the anger bubbling up, but it wasn't just anger. It was empowerment. I had spent so many years trying to fit into their world, trying to make them accept me, trying to prove that I was good enough for Brandon, for his family. But they had never truly seen me. They had never understood me. And in that moment, I understood one thing: this wasn't my fight anymore. This was about me. My future. My dreams. I never asked to be a part of your legacy, I said, my voice quiet but full of strength. But what you don't understand is that I've been building my own. I've been building something that's mine. Something that has nothing to do with any of you. Brendan looked at me, the hurt in his eyes mingling with a growing frustration. He stood up, slamming his hand against the table, the sound reverberating through the room like a warning. You're making a huge mistake, Rachel. Do you really think you can just walk away from everything? From this family? From me? You'll regret this. I didn't flinch. I had heard those words before. You don't get it, do you? I said, the edge in my voice sharpening. I don't need your approval anymore. I've been walking on eggshells for years, trying to make everyone happy. Trying to fit into a life that wasn't mine. And I'm done. I'm done being the woman who hides in the background, hoping that one day you'll see me for who I really am. I've already seen who I am. And I don't need any of you to define that for me. The room was quiet, but it was the kind of silence that spoke volumes. There was no mocking laughter now. There was no condescension. They didn't know how to react. They hadn't expected this. They thought they could break me with a few harsh words, a few cold stares. They thought that I was nothing more than a background character in their perfect, curated family drama. But I wasn't. I was the lead in my own story. I don't care about your legacy, Karen, I continued, my gaze hardening as I turned toward her. I don't care about your approval, or your traditions, or any of the things you've been trying to force on me for years. I've got my own plans now, and this house? It's part of them. Brendan took a step toward me, his face contorting in frustration. You can't just walk away from everything we've built together, he said, his voice rising. You're throwing it all away. For what? Some pipe dream of yours? I felt a flicker of something deep inside me, a memory of the person I used to be, the woman who thought she had to sacrifice everything for the people she loved. But that wasn't me anymore. That woman had died the moment I stepped into that room, and in her place was someone stronger. Someone who would no longer shrink herself to make others comfortable. I'm not throwing anything away, I said calmly. I'm building something better. Something that matters. I could see the realization hitting Brandon. It wasn't just the house. It wasn't just the family. This was about more than anything they could offer me. This was about my art. My vision. My future. You think I've been living in the shadows, don't you? I asked, my voice low but clear. That I've been hiding away in my little backyard studio, playing at being an artist while the rest of you live your perfect lives? Well, you're wrong. I've been building a future. And this house, this place you think is yours? It's mine now. And I'm going to turn it into something that matters. Karen's eyes narrowed, her lips curling into a tight smile, but I could see the doubt creeping into her gaze. She was trying to maintain her composure, but I could tell she wasn't sure how to handle me anymore. She had always been in control. She had always been the one who dictated the rules. But I was taking that power away from her, piece by piece, until there was nothing left but the truth. The art gallery, I said, my voice ringing out like a declaration. I'm going to turn this place into a space for artists who've been overlooked, just like me. I'm going to create a place where art is celebrated, not mocked. A place where people can come and see what's possible when you refuse to give up on your dreams. Brendan opened his mouth to say something, but I didn't let him. And you know what, Brendan? I said, cutting him off. I'm not doing this for you. I'm not doing this for anyone else. I'm doing this for me. Because for the first time in my life, I'm doing what's best for me. I'm taking control of my future. There was a long silence. For the first time in years, I saw the Harrington family not as powerful figures who held my fate in their hands, but as people who had no control over me anymore. They were no longer the puppeteers pulling the strings. I was the one in charge. Brendan stood there, his face a mix of disbelief and anger. But I didn't care. I had made my decision, and I wasn't backing down. I don't need you, and I don't need your family, I said, my voice steady, unwavering. I'm going to take this house, and I'm going to turn it into something that means something. I'm going to make it a place where artists like me can finally be seen. And you know what? One day, you'll look back, and you'll realize you made a huge mistake by pushing me away. But by then, it won't matter. Because I'll be too busy building something beautiful. I turned and walked out of the room, leaving Brendan and his family behind. The weight in my chest that had been there for so long was finally gone. I had confronted them. I had taken control. And now, I was going to build the life I had always dreamed of. As I stepped out of the house, I could hear the faint echoes of their voices behind me, but I didn't care. They could stay in their world, stuck in their traditions and their rules. But I was done playing by their rules. I was going to create my own. The moment I walked out of the Harringtons' house, it felt like I had shed an old skin. The weight I had been carrying for years, years of pretending to be someone I wasn't, years of trying to fit into a family that would never accept me, disappeared with every step I took away from that house. I didn't look back, and I didn't need to. Everything I had left behind in that cold, judgmental mansion had already been replaced with something infinitely more valuable, my own sense of self. As I walked through the front door, it was like I was stepping into a new world, one that was completely mine. I had spent so much of my life adapting to the expectations of others, making sure my art was always secondary, my dreams always delayed, my aspirations always suppressed. I had been a part of their world for too long, trying to make it work, trying to prove that I belonged. But no more. Now, it was time for me to step into my own future. The house, once a symbol of judgment and suffocating tradition, was now something else. Something that belonged to me. Something that was going to become the birthplace of my dreams, the foundation for everything I had ever wanted to build. No longer would it be a place where I felt invisible, where my presence was dismissed, where my art was mocked. No. This house was mine, and it was going to be the center of something far greater than any family legacy they could have imagined. The idea had always been there, quietly tucked away in the corners of my mind, but it wasn't until I left that house behind that I truly understood what I could do with it. I had spent years working in the background, hidden in my little studio, creating art that no one truly appreciated. But no more. I was done being overlooked. I was done being dismissed. The mansion, with its grand halls and towering walls, was now my canvas. My first step was clear. I was going to turn it into an art center, a sanctuary for artists who had been overlooked, for people whose creativity had been stifled by judgment or convention. I wasn't going to just leave behind a legacy of broken promises and shattered dreams. I was going to rebuild something that would last, something that would stand as a testament to everything I had overcome. The process of transforming the mansion began almost immediately. The dust had barely settled before I started working on the plans. I reached out to architects and designers, people who shared my vision, and together we began the process of turning the house into something entirely new. The grand dining room where I had been humiliated was soon to be the main gallery space, a place where artists could showcase their work, their stories, their passions. The library where I had once felt like an intruder became a space for art classes and workshops, a place where creativity could flourish without boundaries. I spent countless hours planning, organizing, and making sure that every detail was perfect. I wanted this space to be more than just a gallery. I wanted it to be a living, breathing entity, a place where people could come together, share ideas, and create something that mattered. The vision for the Haven, as I had decided to call it, was beginning to take shape. It was no longer just about me. It was about the people whose art had been rejected, ignored, or dismissed. It was about giving them a space to thrive, to be seen, and to be heard. But transforming the mansion wasn't just about the physical space. It was about reclaiming my own dignity, my own purpose. I had spent so much time trying to make other people happy, trying to fit into their perfect little world, but in the process, I had forgotten who I was. I had forgotten what it meant to be true to myself. This journey wasn't just about the house. It was about rebuilding myself, about reclaiming my identity and my power. The process was not easy. There were days when I felt like everything was falling apart, days when the weight of the work ahead seemed too much to bear. But each time I felt that way, I remembered why I was doing it. I wasn't doing this for anyone else. I wasn't doing it for Brendan or his family or anyone who had ever doubted me. I was doing it for me. For the woman who had spent too long hiding in the shadows, for the woman who had been told she wasn't good enough, for the woman who was finally ready to show the world who she really was. And slowly, piece by piece, the house transformed. The old, ornate furniture that had once filled the rooms was replaced with minimalist designs, each piece carefully chosen to allow the art to speak for itself. The walls were stripped of the outdated wallpaper that had covered them for years and painted with fresh, vibrant colors that reflected the creativity and energy I wanted this place to embody. As the weeks passed, the art center began to take shape. The first floor was dedicated to exhibitions and galleries, showcasing the work of emerging artists. I wanted to give them a platform, a chance to have their work seen by people who appreciated it, people who understood what it was like to be overlooked. The second floor was transformed into a studio space where artists could come and create, a place where ideas could flourish in an environment free of judgment. I brought in a team of skilled artisans, curators, and instructors to help make the Haven what I had always dreamed it could be, a space where artists and their art could truly thrive. By the time the grand opening arrived, I had poured everything I had into this place, my time, my energy, and my heart. And when the doors finally opened to the public, I was ready. The gallery was filled with works of art, each one telling its own story, each one a testament to the resilience of the people who had created it. The atmosphere was electric, full of excitement and energy, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was exactly where I was meant to be. The opening night was everything I had hoped for. The walls of the Haven were filled with people, art collectors, curators, critics, and artists, all gathered to celebrate the beginning of something new. I stood at the entrance, greeting guests, smiling as I watched them wander through the galleries, admiring the work that had taken years to bring to life. And as the night went on, I couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. This wasn't just an art center. It was my victory. It was the culmination of everything I had fought for, everything I had endured, and everything I had believed in. The moment the last guest left, I stood in the middle of the gallery, surrounded by the art that had once been mocked, the art that had been dismissed as unimportant, and I realized something that took my breath away. I had done it. I had turned my pain into something beautiful. I had taken the house that had once been a prison and transformed it into a sanctuary. I had created something meaningful, something lasting, and something that was entirely my own. In the days that followed, the response to the Haven exceeded my expectations. Art magazines reached out for interviews, collectors began to show interest, and people who had once ignored me were now asking how they could be a part of this project. But for me, it wasn't about the fame or the recognition. It was about the fact that I had done something real. I had built something from the ground up, something that had purpose and meaning. And then, as I stood in the gallery one afternoon, looking out over the bustling art center, I received a message that made my heart stop, an invitation to collaborate with the Smithsonian Conservation Center. The very institution that had rejected my internship application 3 years in a row now wanted to partner with me on a project to preserve and showcase forgotten art. The thought of it made me smile. This was it, the culmination of everything. The recognition, the validation, the confirmation that I wasn't just a dreamer. I was a force to be reckoned with. And as I typed my response, I realized something else. I wasn't just reclaiming my past. I was building my future. I had taken the brokenness of my past, the humiliation, the betrayal, and I had turned it into something beautiful. The Haven wasn't just an art center. It was a symbol of resilience, a place where artists could rebuild, where creativity could flourish, and where dreams could become reality. As I stood there, I realized that the mansion had been transformed into something far greater than I had ever imagined. It wasn't just a house anymore. It was a home. A home for art, a home for dreams, and most importantly, a home for me. It's funny how life works. The very things you've been rejected for, the things you've been laughed at, belittled for, they can become the source of your greatest strength. I had spent years in the shadow of my own dreams, hiding behind the walls of a mansion that was never truly mine, trying to gain approval from people who could never understand me. But now, as the doors of the art center swung open for its grand debut, I could feel a new energy coursing through my veins, a sense of empowerment I had never experienced before. This was the moment I had been working toward for so long, the culmination of everything I had endured, and everything I had fought for. I stood at the entrance of the Haven, my art center, watching as people from all walks of life streamed inside. They were admiring the art, pointing at pieces, discussing the stories behind them, and I realized something profound. They were appreciating what I had once been ridiculed for. For so long, I had been made to feel like my art didn't matter, like my dreams were too far-fetched, too impractical. My in-laws had mocked me for it, calling my art just a hobby, a distraction from a real job. And even Brandon, my own husband, had been indifferent, distant, completely disengaged with what was supposed to be one of the most important parts of my life. But here I was now. This wasn't just an art center. This was my reclamation. This was where my work, my true work, was finally being recognized, not by people who had ignored me or belittled me, but by people who truly understood the value of what I was doing. I could hear the hum of appreciation in the air, and it made my heart swell with pride. For the first time in a long time, I felt truly seen. As I walked through the gallery, I couldn't help but smile. The paintings that had once been dismissed as unfinished or too abstract were now hanging proudly on the walls, their colors vibrant, their stories unfolding for anyone willing to stop and look. Each piece of art was a part of me, a reflection of my journey, my struggle, and my triumph. And as I watched people linger in front of them, I felt something stir deep inside me. I was no longer the woman who had been laughed at or cast aside. I was the woman who had created this space. The woman who had built something from the ground up. The woman who had turned her dreams into a reality, no matter how impossible they had once seemed. The opening night was everything I had hoped for and more. The air was electric, buzzing with excitement. The gallery was full of artists, collectors, curators, and critics, all there to see the art, to appreciate the talent that had once been overlooked. For the first time, I was standing at the center of it all, and it felt incredible. The walls that had once been filled with judgment and criticism were now echoing with admiration and applause. One by one, people came up to me, shaking my hand, congratulating me on creating such a beautiful space. They praised the gallery, praised the art, and most of all, they praised the vision behind it. It was clear to everyone in the room that this place wasn't just about the art, it was about the story behind it. It was about the woman who had been rejected, who had been humiliated, but who had turned that pain into something more powerful than anyone could have imagined. I spotted familiar faces in the crowd, faces I hadn't expected to see. People from the art world, people who had once laughed at me, people who had told me that my work wasn't real art. They were here, standing in front of my pieces, nodding in appreciation, and I couldn't help but feel a rush of satisfaction. It was the sweetest kind of revenge, not the kind fueled by anger, but the kind that comes from succeeding despite the odds, from proving everyone wrong without saying a word. I spotted Mildred across the room, her face tight with disapproval as she glanced around at the bustling crowd. I had expected her to show up. After all, she had made it clear from the beginning that she didn't approve of my art. She had said it more times than I could count, her condescending remarks, her judgmental glances. But now, as she stood there in her designer dress, clutching a glass of wine, I couldn't help but smile to myself. This was my moment, not hers. The tables had turned. I was the one who had created something meaningful, something real. And despite everything she had said, despite all the years of mockery, I was the one who had the last laugh. I approached her slowly, but I wasn't in a hurry. This wasn't about confrontation. It was about reclaiming my power. I watched her as she pretended to glance at the paintings, but I could see the unease in her eyes. She was uncomfortable. And that made me feel stronger. "Rachel," she said, her voice as stiff as ever. "I see you've done well for yourself." The words came out reluctantly, as if she were forcing herself to say them. "The place looks impressive." I smiled, but it wasn't the smile I used to wear when I was trying to impress her. No, this was different. This was a smile of quiet confidence. "Thank you, Mildred," I said, my voice calm and composed. "It's been a lot of work, but I'm proud of what we've built here. It's more than just a gallery, it's a space for artists who need a place to be seen. A place where they're appreciated." I could see her trying to hide her discomfort, her gaze darting around the room as she tried to avoid looking me in the eye. "Yes, well," she cleared her throat. "I suppose there's a market for everything these days." I could feel the satisfaction bubbling inside me, but I didn't let it show. I didn't need to prove anything to her anymore. I had already done it. The art spoke for itself. The success of this place spoke for itself. And for the first time, I realized something: I didn't need her approval. I didn't need anyone's approval. I had built this on my own terms, and that was worth more than any validation she could ever offer. As I turned to walk away, I spotted Brandon across the room. He was standing by the bar, talking to some guests, but as our eyes met, I could see the confusion in his gaze. He didn't know how to react. He didn't know what to do with the woman standing before him now. He wasn't the man I had married anymore, and I wasn't the woman who had waited in silence for him to see my worth. I didn't walk over to him. I didn't need to. Instead, I found myself surrounded by people who truly appreciated me, people who saw the value of what I had done, people who understood that this was more than just a building. It was a symbol of everything I had fought for: my dignity, my purpose, my art. It was a reminder to myself and to everyone in that room that I was more than just a wife, more than just a woman who had been rejected. I was an artist. And my work mattered. As the night wore on, and the guests began to filter out, I stood in the center of the gallery, letting the stillness of the room wash over me. I looked at the paintings, the sculptures, the photographs, all of it was mine. All of it had come from my heart, my soul. This place was a reflection of everything I had been through and everything I had become. I wasn't just a woman who had been hurt. I wasn't just a woman who had been mocked. I was a woman who had turned her pain into something beautiful. Something lasting. The opening night had come to an end, but this was just the beginning. For the first time in my life, I was truly free. Free from the expectations of others. Free from the judgment. Free to be exactly who I was meant to be. And that was worth more than anything. As I stood there, surrounded by the art that had once been dismissed, I realized that I had done it. I had created something real. Something that would last long after the last guest had left. The art center wasn't just a place to showcase my work, it was my legacy. It was my voice. And I was finally ready to let the world hear it.
That's it for today's story on Life Reflections. I'd love to hear your take. Drop a comment below with your thoughts or a story of your own. If you enjoyed this, give a like and subscribe to keep the reflections coming. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.